And it's wonderful to be together and to learn together this morning as we are celebrating the seventh day of Hanukkah, and really just a few hours away, 5 hours or so until the lighting of the eighth night of Hanukkah, which is always very, very beautiful, very meaningful, as we see the all-laid lights of the Chanukiah, of the menorah. And what I'd like to speak about today is one of the great lights of our tradition, and that, of course, is Rav Yitzchak Cohen Kook. And one of the great lights in terms of our mitzvot is the mitzvah of Shabbos. And what I'd like to look at today is the perspective and some of the novel ideas that Rav Kook brings to our celebration of Shabbos. Hopefully something that is meaningful for us practically, how to bring greater richness to our Shabbos experience. So let's begin with the following source from Rav Kook. We're going to read a sentence from Rav Kook. Where does Rav Kook speak about Shabbos? So there is a sefer that Rav Kook wrote called Shabbat Haaretz. You see that on page 1. This is a book that's about Shemitah, that's about the sabbatical year. But one of the things that he does, and we'll see that in a moment in the introduction, is that he speaks about Shabbos, the weekly Shabbos, and how that relates to the Shabbat Haaretz, the Shemitah that we have every 7 years. But we're focusing on Shabbos itself. And here Rav Kook writes the following. And let's begin. We always like to see the language of Rav Kook. We'll see. We'll look at a first sentence in Hebrew, then, just for the sake of time, and to move things along, we'll look at his the interpretation in English. At the very top of page 1, Teva haneshama haklalit, the very nature of the neshama, the soul of the Jewish people, shel Knesset Yisrael, hu elokiyuta. Our soul is a godly soul. That we as a Jewish people, it may be true of all people, but especially the Jewish people, that we have a soul, each of us, all of OUIsrael, every Jew has a soul that is a spark of the divine. We have a divine spark within us. Lo bechirata garmala et yichona loki. It's not something that we have chosen, our bechira. Lo mitzad maaseh pratim. It's not because of anything that we have done, any action per se. Lo b'tzidkata v'yosher livava ba'al el ma'alata. And it's not because we have necessarily chosen a path of righteousness or of yosher. So how is it that we have this neshama, this soul that is a godly soul? Says Rav Kook, tichunat giz'ah. It's at the core of our very nature. It's the very quality of a Jew, hagufani v'ruchani, in a physical sense and in a spiritual sense. Aseta la et chela ve'et uza be'elokim, that we have a particular strength, we have a valor, we have this quality of godliness within us. Okay. So that's how Rav Kook begins, or that's how we're going to begin. The godliness that is within us, how does that relate to Shabbat? So now let's go to the English translation, and we're going to go right to the middle of the page where it says, this national treasure. We're on page 1, and this is a translation now of Rav Kook. This national treasure that is imprinted deep within us, the image of a world that is good, upright, and godly, aligned with peace, justice, grace, and courage, all filled with pervasive divine perspective that rests in the spirit of the people, cannot be actualized within a way of life that is purely secular. Without being attached to the holiness, and he's going to speak about the holiness of Shabbat, we're not able to nurture that soul, that godliness within us. Such a life full of frenetic action veils the glory of our divine soul, and the soul's clear light is blocked from shining through the overpowering mundane reality. The mundane reality, that's every week, day in and day out. We're paying our bills, we're checking our emails, we're responding to WhatsApp, we're looking at Facebook, whatever we do during the week, but it fills us and it kind of overwhelms us. It's overpowering. The impulse towards growth and self-realization needs space to come to fruition. We need a space for our soul to be able to be nurtured and to grow. We need to stop and shake off the bedlam of our daily lives. Interesting. He's talking in the early 1900s, the bedlam of daily life. I think we're in a hyper bedlam of daily life in our day. It is very true. It is very true from the moment that People wake up in the morning, we're already checking our phones, we're checking all day long, messages coming in, phone calls that need to be made, and our lives are very much bedlam. So in that, Rav Kook says it's difficult for us. We have this soul, and a soul, this godly soul within us, that's just yearning for spirituality, that's yearning for closeness with God. And sometimes that's not something that we can easily connect with during the week. So says Rav Kook, we're going to read one more paragraph here in the English below, final paragraph on the page. The individual shakes off mundane routine frequently, every week. That's what we do every week. Shabbat comes and so does rest. The soul begins to shed her harsh chains. The Lord has given you rest from your sorrow and trouble and from the hard service that you were made to serve. The soul then seeks higher pathways of spiritual desire that are consonant with the nature of her source. And I would make the following comment. I think for many people, when we think about Shabbat, we think about it as a day of rest. In other words, all of the hectic activity during the week that we need to rest from that. That is true. It's called the Yom Menucha. But Rav Kook is emphasizing something else about the Shabbat, and that is the soul needs to be nurtured. The soul needs to grow. The soul yearns for a closeness with God, for spirituality. When does that happen? That happens on Shabbat. It's not just a day of rest from all of the harried life of the week. It's the soul that is yearning for that experience, that's just waiting week in and week out to be in the presence of God, to feel the Shekhinah, to be raised, to be nurtured, to grow. Reading on now in the words of Rav Kook, it is good to praise the Lord, to sing hymns to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your steadfast love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night with a 10-string harp, with voice and lyre together. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. This is a holy day when the innate inclination of the people for a godly life emerges from its hiddenness. In other words, this is innate to a Jew, to the Jewish people, and to all of us. A yearning for godliness and spirituality. It is a sign for the people that its sole treasure contains within it the need and the ability to rejoice in God in the light of the divine. And the last sentence of this paragraph, this is concentrated in the point of the extra soul that dwells within each one of the people's children, Yes. What is the extra soul? That is the neshama yisera. And what does it mean, neshama yisera, neshama yitera? This extra soul that we have, one way of interpreting, you could say extra soul, or a soul that's an expansive soul. And we want to expand that soul. We want a soul that feels connected to Hashem, that feels connected to godliness. So that's the opening idea from Rav Kook about Shabbat. What is Shabbat all about? Shabbat is a day in which we are anticipating, we are waiting for, our souls are waiting for that experience of spirituality to connect with godliness, to connect. There's spirituality connecting with family, with friends, with study of Torah. That is the Shabbat. Okay, and therefore, we can turn now to page 2. Rav Kook suggests that there is tshuva, which one should do right before Shabbat begins. I don't know if anybody has thought about that idea. I don't know if I have ever thought about that idea, but he writes the following. This is page 2, left side of the page where it says number 1. This is from his work, Orot HaTshuva, Perik Yudalid, Piskal Lamed Gimel, Be'erev Shabbat Kodesh. As Shabbat is coming in, Tzrichim la'asok b'tshuva. A person should be engaged in tshuva. Al kol ha'avar b'yimot hachol. Everything that transpired during the past week, kedei lekabel, in order to receive kedusha Shabbat below shum miniyah, that there should not be any impediment to our accepting of Shabbos b'chol davar ched ve'avon. In other words, we need to put aside everything from the previous week in order to bring in Shabbos and to experience Shabbos the way that our soul wants to experience Shabbat. And that, by the way, is part of what the halacha has in mind, right? Put everything away, put the cell phones away, put the computers away, even in terms of your thought, right? To put away all of those responsibilities and some of the things that are weighing us down from the week. All of that, put that aside as Shabbat enters. There's a little moment, says Rav Kook, of tshuva as we're entering Shabbat. Put it all aside and enter Shabbat so that you can embrace Shabbat. You could receive the holiness of Shabbat properly. Maybe that's why we have Kabbalah Shabbos. In other words, we add to our davening on Friday night, that there's an opportunity that we say the Psalms, the Tehillim, that we're bringing in Shabbos, not the regular way during the week of just Mariv. Some people go to the mikveh before Shabbos, as the minhag, Hasidim, others as well, that go to the mikveh right before Shabbos. It's a way of cleansing oneself from the week so that Shabbos, the spirituality of Shabbos can be received properly. Yes, please. Is it a being? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we would say it's a being. There's a godliness within us. There's a spark of God within us. But it's a good question. I would say that's another discussion or another class of what that means in the Shema, right? How to define that exactly. But I think simply for us, and I think even intuitively, we would all agree that it represents a spiritual yearning that we have, a godliness that's within us. And Rav Kook says, and that was the opening where we started, that the neshama of a Jew, the neshama of the Jewish people, is one that's filled with godliness. We are yearning for that. We want to connect with that. We want to feel that godliness. Shabbos is a day for that. Okay, so that's how we are to enter Shabbos. Rav Kook is now going to talk about another aspect of Shabbos through a story that we're about to see, quite an amazing story in the Gemara, where one is not only to experience Shabbos on Shabbos, but the way that we carry Shabbos with us for the rest of the week as well. So there's the following Gemara, which is found in Shabbos Lamed Gimel Amud Beis 33b. It's a well-known Gemara. It's about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, together with his son, they run into a cave. They run and hide from the Romans. And during that time, they spend many, many years in the cave. They are studying together. They're in hiding, but they're also studying the secrets of the Torah together at that time. And some say based on that, we have teachings of the Zohar based on the teachings that they shared with one another. Some point out that Lag BaOmer is a celebration of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai as he finally makes his way outside of the cave. This is the story in the Gemara. They're in the cave. They make their way out. This is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar. They make their way out of the cave. They come out of the cave, and what do they do when they come out of the cave? Says the Gemara, they see people that are working, they see people that are farming, and they burn them up. They burn those people up, right, with their eyes. Question is what that means. I don't know if it means literally that they burn them up, but it seems to mean that they're somewhat impatient with the fact that they can't understand how is it that a person has the opportunity to live such a spiritual life, this intense spiritual life, and how is it that people are just kind of spending their day doing all this other stuff? You're watching TV, you're watching videos, you're taking buses, you're going to work. How can you be doing that when there's all this spirituality and godliness that you have the opportunity to be engaged in? And they just can't, they can't understand that. And not only do they not understand it, they're ready to burn up, that world, so to speak. What does God say? God says, well, I'd like you now to re-enter the cave. That's not the way that I want you to interact with this world. That's not the correct viewpoint. Go inside the cave again, right? Go to your room and think this over. So that's what they do. They go to their room, they think it over, and when you're ready to come out of your room and you know, you can come down. So that's what Hashem says. So they come out a second time, and it seems that his son, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's son, is still burning people up. He hasn't quite learned the lesson. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai then heals everyone who has been burnt. But then the following incident happens, and with this incident, they then recognize that that everyone is okay, that the Jewish people are a holy people. So here we're going to read the following. This is the Gemara, and we're going to see a very interesting insight of Rav Kook. So this is page 2. The Gemara is on the right side. We're going to go to the third paragraph, and it says, the Gemara continues, Behade Panya de Male Shabta. If you see that, it's the last paragraph in that section on page 2. Behade Panya de Male Shabta. It was the night, as night began to fall, late Friday afternoon. This is where they've just come out of the cave a second time. Chazu Hahu Saba. They saw an elderly man. Dahave Naki Tre Madane Asa. He was holding 2 bundles of myrtles. The Rahid Ben Ashmashos, and he was running at Ben Ashmashos at twilight, right before Shabbos. So Amru, they said to him, this is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Hani lamalach, why do you have these myrtles in your hand? Amar lehu, he said to them, L'kavod Shabbos. I'm carrying these L'kavod Shabbos, in honor of Shabbos. V'tiski lach bechad, isn't it enough just to have one of them? Why do you need two bundles? So he answers, Chad keneged zachor, v'chad keneged shamor. One bundle is symbolic of zachor, the other bundle is symbolic of shamor. Like the Torah says in the Ten Commandments, in one place it's zachor at Yom Shabbat, in the other place it's shamor. Like we say in Lechadodi, shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, that Hashem said both in a single utterance. So Amar le libere, sort of Shimon bar Yochai then said to his son, Chaze kama chavivin mitzvot al Yisrael. We see how precious are mitzvot to the Jewish people. That is the Gemara. Now, the question is, what is going on here? It's very, very strange. They come out, they see this man running, he's holding two bundles in his hand, and he says, one is shamor, one is zachor, and with that, they are assuaged. At that moment, they kind of see how beautiful the Jewish people are, how much they love mitzvot. Okay, what's happened here? What's going on here? So this is Rav Kook's explanation of this Agadata. And let's read a few lines in Rav Kook. We like to read Rav Kook. Ein ayah, this is his commentary. He wrote a commentary on Brachos and Shabbos, so we're lucky that we have his commentary here. This is, again, Shabbos Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, 33b. And he writes the following. Kedushat HaShabbat yesh shnayim bekocha. There are two powers or two particular strengths that Shabbos has within it. Ha'echad, ma shehi mikadeshet u'ma'alet Yisrael b'kedushata el-yonah. Shabbos raises up the Jewish people to a very high place spiritually. U'miromemet ota be'etzem kedushat hayom l'mala mikol inyanei chol. It lifts them up from all of the mundane week. Umid davkam bechavod elyon ukedusha elyona, and it attaches them middabek. It attaches the Jew to a very holy place, ukedusha elyon, to a very high level of kedusha. So that's one thing that happens at Shabbos. What does Shabbos do? And this is what we said earlier. Shabbos is that day that the soul of a Jew connects with godliness, with spirituality. It raises us up. We're just waiting for that opportunity all week long to be raised out of the mundane week and to feel the spirituality that we're all yearning for. That's Shabbos. That's one aspect of Shabbos. But there's another aspect of Shabbos, says Rav Kook. Chutz mizeh. But in addition to that, hi mamshechet gamkein et koach kol yemei ha'maaseh, but it also has an influence, an impact on the rest of the week as well. Im kol chiloniyutam ushiflotam. There is wholeness to the week, the mundane, the profane aspect of weekday life, and shiflutam, there's a lowliness of the weekday events as well. She'al yedei shehem nizkarim b'kedushat haShabbat hinam mitramamim. But as the week is attached, and the way that we attach the weekday to Shabbos, we also raise up the weekdays as well. Ube'ein hakara muchashit, and without even noticing it per se, hanefesh hayisraelit miromemet atzma, that the nefesh is raised, afilu b'mei achol, even during the weekday, mipnei zecher shel yom HaShabbat, by remembering the Shabbat. Now, interesting, the Torah says two words about Shabbat. Shamor et yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, zachor et yom HaShabbat l'kadsho. You are to remember the Shabbat, you are to shamor, you are to guard the Shabbat, watch over the Shabbat. So what does it mean to watch over the Shabbat? Shamor, to guard the Shabbat? So that's the first interpretation, that the Shabbat itself needs to be watched. It needs to be guarded so that we get the most out of Shabbat. But what does it mean, zachor et yom HaShabbat, to remember Shabbat? Does it mean to remember on the day of Shabbat? That's one way of interpreting it. But here Rav Kook is suggesting that zachor means what? That we remember it all week long. In other words, that it has, and that's why the Torah goes out of its way to say shamor. Make sure your Shabbat is guarded. Guard it. Make sure that you fill it with davening, and you fill it with chesed, and with good meals with people, and a day of learning. Guard the Shabbat. Make sure there's 24 hours, right? Don't dibur chol. Don't talk about your bills. Don't talk about your schedule for the coming week. Don't start packing on Shabbos for what you're doing after Shabbos. Guard that day. Guard that day and make sure that Shabbat is filled with holiness. because as Rav Kook says, you need it and you're waiting for it and your soul desires it. So make sure to guard it. Make sure your Shabbat, even the Dibor around the table, make sure you're talking things that are appropriate for Shabbat. So make sure, guard that day. But then God says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. Well, what do you mean, remember Shabbat? That's the Shamor. Well, Zachor, says Rav Kook, means to remember it all week long, right? The way that Shabbat, the way that you experience Shabbat is something that can spill over into the rest of the week. And please. You're right. We do say Havdalah at the end of Shabbos. Yes, that's true. So there is a distinction, and we do need to go into the week. However, we also need to take from the spirituality of Shabbat. It doesn't end there. We'll talk about that in a moment. Interesting. So, no, it's a good point. On the one hand, and we'll see a story in a moment that addresses that. On the one hand, Havdalah, there is the separation. We do need to go into the week. God does want us, Sheshet Yamin Ta'avod, 6 days we should be doing this. We got to sit with a cup of coffee and learn and get here and do all the things that's part of the week. But we also need to bring that spirituality of Shabbos into the weekday as well. So let's just read on in the words of Rabbi Kook. Umibnei zeh zecher shel Shabbat, ubazeh ein divrei achol shvelim. If we take the holiness of Shabbat into the week, then the weekdays are not lowly. Ein divrei achol shvelim kol kach, kemo shehem nir'im bechitzoniyut shelahem. Even though on the outside it may look like they're just mundane, days of the week, that's not true. Ki im heim holchim umitalim b'kedushat haShabbat. If you bring that holiness of Shabbat, that spirituality of Shabbat into the week as well. Okay, so Rav Kook now is going to address the story itself, the particulars in the story. What happened in the story? They saw this old man. He was running ben hashmashot. He was running right in the twilight hour, right before Shabbat, and he was holding these myrtles in his hand. Now, what is that? Rav Kook says those all hint to different aspects of the Shabbat in this teaching. Let's read this last paragraph on the page. This is page 2 on the bottom. We haven't turned the page yet. So ben hashmashot. Why does the Gemara say they saw a man that was running ben hashmashot? What does ben hashmashot mean? That's the twilight, right? That's where it's beginning to get dark, but it's not dark yet. It's weekday, but it's not yet Shabbos, right? The stars haven't come out yet. I mean, we're makbid once it's ben hashmashot that we no longer do malacha because it's the possibility that it's already Shabbos. So what's ben hashmashot? Writes Rav Kook, hu hama'avar. We're reading right now the very last paragraph on page 2. These are the words of Rav Kook. Ben hashmashot hu hama'avar. That's the transition. Shebein ha'avar la'atid. It moves from the past to the future. V'hu mikasher et hachol el hakodesh. It's the place where there's a connection between chol and kodesh. So what does it mean, ben hashmashot? It means that there is a connection between Shabbos and the rest of the week. Umoreh hashpa'at hakodesh al hachol ayidei kishuro. That there's an impact, that there's an influence of Shabbos, hashpa'ah. There's an influence of Shabbos, of that holiness, on the rest of the week as well. That's why the Gemara says that it happened ben hashmashot, meaning that Shabbos, there's a little bit of Shabbos in ben hashmashos, there's a little bit of chol in ben hashmashos. There is a mixture. It doesn't end. Havdalah doesn't quite end Shabbos. It continues on. By the way, how long can you make Havdalah? Interesting, you're talking about Havdalah till Tuesday. So till Tuesday, and what does that mean? What does that reflect? What does the halacha say? I thought Shabbos ended Saturday night. What do you mean? Motzei Shabbat. What do you mean I could still be saying Havdalah on Tuesday? What does that seem to suggest? That there's some Shabbos that's still there. If I could still say Havdalah, it means there's some little bit, some trace of Shabbos that's still there. When do we begin, by the way, when do we begin in our davening, and we have Shir Shel Yom that we say every day? When do we begin talking about Shabbos? That's right, on Wednesday morning. What do we say? L'chuna ranana. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The Shir Shel Yom that we say at the very end, by Wednesday morning, we're already thinking about Shabbos. So here we are, Tuesday, Havdalah. Wednesday, we're already anticipating. So we see even the halacha, this idea, how do we bring some of that spirituality of Shabbos into the week, that holiness of Shabbos into the week? That's what Rav Kook says is what's going on here. Yes, please. Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. No, beautiful. It doesn't affect the Zachor. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well done. Well done.
There are people who like candles.
People that like there are people that like candles. Well, I would, and your point is well taken. What Shabbos is over? What do we do? There's a mitzvah that relates to Shabbos right after Shabbos. What is that? Malava Malka. Malava Malka means we're escorting out the king of Shabbos or the queen. We're escorting the Shabbos. Well, that means that Shabbos is not quite over. I thought Shabbos was over. What do you mean that we're still being malava the Shabbos? So Shabbos is still there. So yes. So we see that even in halacha and in our practice, that we have this sense that Shabbos is something that we are to bring into the week, that we're supposed to feel the spirituality of Shabbos. Yes, there's Havdalah, but what is it, and we'll see this in a moment, what is it that we've gained from Shabbos? In what way have we grown from Shabbos? What have we realized on Shabbos that we want to bring that into the week as well? Okay, so let's just read just the last line here. Alpha P, 4 lines up in this last paragraph. Alpha P, shemitzara hargasha chitzona, nireh she'achol hu me'od migusham upachut. Even though it looks to the naked eye that the weekday is it's filled with gashmiut and pachut, that it's lowly, that it's very mundane, it's profane. We call it chol. Chol means you have kodesh and you have chol. Chol means that it doesn't have kedusha, even though it appears that way. Mikol makom yesh bo koach penimi. That there is, if you look a little bit deeper, if you look inside, even the weekday, shirak b'skira shel hargasha penimit. You need to evaluate it very carefully. If you sense it, the fragrance that you can pick up even from the weekday, you can sense even in the weekday the kedusha of Shabbos as well. And he says that's what's represented by what was he holding in his hands? He was holding the myrtles, right? The fragrance of the myrtles in his hand. So those myrtles represent that even during the week, that there's the fragrance of Shabbos. Okay, we don't have the Kiddush of Shabbos, we don't have the Challah, we don't have all the halacha of Shabbos, but we're taking some of the fragrance, right? Some of the what's found inside the Shabbos, right? The very essence of Shabbos, that we bring that into the week as well. Okay, now what does that mean exactly? How do we understand that? So let's look at the following. And it really is a question, how do we bring the spirituality of Shabbos into the week? So here Rav Kook says, let's begin. This is page 3 on the right side of the page. And this is from Orota Tshuva. And he says, on Motzei Shabbos, we need to do the following. What do you do Motzei Shabbos? You do the dishes right after Shabbos? What do you do? You go to a movie, you order pizza. So let's see what Rav Kook says you should do right after Shabbos. So this is Orota Tshuva. This is Perek Yudal Lamed Gimel. V'motzei Shabbos Kodesh tzrichim lashuv b'tshuva. So he says it's another time for tshuva. We have to do tshuva a lot, according to Rav Kook. As Shabbos enters, it's a moment of tshuva. That tshuva, by the way, what did we say a moment ago? That's tshuva about really putting everything aside and kind of maybe even correcting a bit some of the things and think about the past week. He says as Shabbos is coming in, it's a time to kind of take that in, to think about that, and to come in to Shabbos so that we can embrace Shabbos in all of its beauty. And as Shabbos comes to a close, we need to do tshuva as well. Now, what tshuva is that? So he says the following: Ubemotzei Shabbat Kodesh Shrichim Lashuv B'Tshuva Ala Tochen Shel Ha'arat HaShabbat. That there's a light of Shabbos that entered us, and to do tshuva and to raise ourselves with that light of Shabbos. We've just experienced something on Shabbos that is uplifting. We've seen the world in a different way. We've loved one another. I always talk about seeing one another on Shabbos, that we see each other differently on Shabbos. And to take that with us, to take that purity of Shabbos, it doesn't end right there. It doesn't end and now we go back to the week and just kind of go back to everything that we were doing. How do we take that uplift of Shabbos, that spirituality of Shabbos, and now bring it into the week, that it impacts us? That's what Rav Kook says. I don't know if that's not an easy thing to do. Maybe it's not natural, but it's for Rav Kook as a tzaddik, and he's thinking about how do we get the most out of Shabbos. It's not just a standalone day, and now Havdalah, as you said, and it's all over. It's not all over, right? How do we bring Shabbos into the week? So he says, Motzei Shabbos Kodesh Tzrichim Lashuv B'Tshuva Ala Tochen Shel Ha'arat HaShabbos Sheyeh Naki B'lo Shum Ta'arovet. That we bring that that cleanliness of Shabbos, the purity of Shabbos, how we've been cleansed through Shabbos, how we've been cleansed, and how to bring that, how to move forward with that. Okay. Rav Kook, yes, please. Doing, that's, yeah, I hear you saying, the way that he expresses it, yes. In other words, the way that I understand that line, or you can look at his tshuva must be, how do they translate it here? The quality illumination of the Shabbos. His tshuva must make that quality clean without any admixture. I think the way that I understand what Rav Kook is saying is that you take that purity of Shabbos and you don't allow it just to kind of be lost, right? That it just kind of gets lost in, in your, that's the below shum tarovet. That doesn't get mixed up and lost as the week begins. You hold on to that purity of Shabbos. Yes, let me just, the comment in the back, yeah.
Isn't that one of the reasons that Motzei Shabbos many people stay in their big Shabbos and that they light candles to continue?
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, absolutely. So we see there is that idea of Malava Malka and lighting candles, and this idea of bringing Shabbos, of extending Shabbos, of bringing that purity of Shabbos, as Rav Kook is speaking about here, into the week. Into the week. Yes. Let me just.
Something about it.
Yeah, right. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. And by the way, your point is well taken. Tshuva, we think is tshuva means for that which we've done wrong, for transgression. I think he's using the word tshuva here. Tshuva means to uplift. In other words, yes, come back to Shabbos, that we should be uplifted. That sense of tshuva, not for something that we did wrong. The tshuva of now taking the beauty of Shabbos, that purity, and bringing it into our life. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's true. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The Hasidim, they hold on to Shabbos long. They're not waiting. They're not, is it over 5:47? We're done. No, right. As long as you can hold on to Shabbos, the better. Okay. So Rav Kook now quotes, in his Siddur, Olat Riyah, he quotes a mystical source from the Kabbalah that speaks about what Eliyahu HaNavi does at the end of Shabbos. So this is the top of page 3 on the left side. I have it in the Hebrew and it's translated as well. Eliyahu HaNavi. This is his comment, and this is in the section of Havdalah. Many people at the end of Shabbos, they sing Eliyahu HaNavi. Yeah. Eliyahu HaNavi. Why do we do that at the end of Shabbos? So here's one source. There are different explanations. Here's one source. Because Eliyahu does something at the end of every Shabbos, and we want to, says Rav Kook, we want to connect with what Eliyahu HaNavi does at the end of every Shabbos. So what does he do? Here, top of the page. Eliyahu, what does he do? Yoshev b'chol Motzei Shabbos. Eliyahu HaNavi sits every Motzei Shabbos. Tachas Eitz HaChaim. He sits, he enters the Garden of Eden at the end of every Shabbos. He sits under the tree of life. V'kotev zechu yoteim shel Yisrael. And he writes down all the merits of the Jewish people. That's what Eliyahu HaNavi does at the end of every Shabbos. He looks at the Shabbos, he looks back at the Shabbos and says, wow, what an amazing people, Am Yisrael, what they do, their observance of Shabbos. And he writes all the merits of Am Yisrael. And then, this is what Rav Kook writes, Al Kain, therefore, Ra'ui, l'chol mi sheyesh lo shayachut shel tshuka l'razei Torah. Any person who has this inclination for the secrets of Torah, she midat gilui Eliyahu, which is this idea of a revealing of Eliyahu HaNavi, be'ezeh darga, whatever level you're on, afilu imrak, he rak b'derech dimyon, even if it's in your imagination, or hargashar, if you feel it, or hasagat haseichel anshi, or intellectually, v'kavachomer, im aleh b'chesed elyon l'madrigat yoter gvah, or if you reach high levels after Shabbos. This is what he writes, shekol motzei Shabbat kodesh, every Motzei Shabbos, what should every Jew do? Yaseh gam hu kemasav shel Eliyahu. that every Jew at the end of Shabbos should follow in the path of Eliyahu HaNavi. That you should feel at the end of Shabbos the greatness of OUisrael, the love for Jews, and to count the merits of the Jewish people. That's what one should be doing. I'll take your comment in a second. And I just want to read the English here. Look at the second paragraph. This is a translation of the paragraph above. With clear intellectual cognition, second paragraph, he should recognize the sanctity of Israel and its precious stature. He should attach himself to the collective holy nation, the nation of God, and his special inheritance, in which the appearance of the holy light of every individual is boundless, such that even upon the empty ones of Israel the entire world stands. One should quiver with holy awe at the sanctity of the lofty divine soul of every Jew, and be filled with longing and eternal desire for the sanctity of the exalted glory of Israel in general, for the success of every individual Jew in all his material and spiritual pursuits. From the depths of his soul, he should cry out and exclaim, "O happy Israel! Fortunate are you, Israel! Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord?" And this is what you should say every Motzei Shabbos, says Rav Kook, "I love you, my people and nation. I desire with all my heart and all my soul, with all my warmth. I desire with my soul, with all the warmth of my heart. I want you with all the fire in my bones. I long to see your glory, your beauty and splendor, when you will be exalted and arise, when you will develop your beautiful character, when all your qualities and hidden wonders will be actualized." Okay, we'll stop there. So what is it that we are to feel at the end of every Shabbos? A love for our fellow Jew. Our love for our fellow Jew, our love for our family members, our love for OUisrael as a whole, that we should feel as Shabbos comes to a close. This is what Eliyahu does at the end of Shabbos. And I mentioned before, I think one of the things that we feel on Shabbos that we do not feel in the same way the rest of the week is an attachment to others, is a closeness with others. And it starts with just the way that we walk on the street and we say Shabbat Shalom to others, we look at others. During the week, we often look down. We don't greet others. What's happening on Shabbos that we're greeting others, that we're looking at each other during the week, and we're not doing that we're doing that on Shabbos, and we're not doing it during the week. And I would say also, just sitting around a Shabbos table and the way that we, with our own family, with our children, with our grandchildren, with friends, and a closeness that we feel with one another on Shabbos that we don't somehow feel in the same way the rest of the week. And Rav Kook says, as you come to the end of Shabbos, what does Eliyahu HaNavi do? He speaks about the greatness and the merit of everyone, of every person, of every Jew, and that we need to feel, that's how we should enter the week as well. And that's part of the tshuva, he says, speaking about the tshuva that we do to enter the week is a tshuva of that feeling that I had, that closeness, that attachment that I had with others on Shabbos is something that I need to carry over to the week as well. Why not greet others that way during the week? Why not look at others the way that we look at one another on Shabbos? Maybe we can't do it in the same way. Maybe there is something special. There is that sanctity of Shabbos. That is that holiness of Shabbos. But how do we bring some of that it doesn't end with Havdalah? We don't want it to end with Havdalah. How do we bring that fragrance of Shabbos into the week as well? And that's what Rav Kook says. We have Shamor, make sure to watch, to guard the Shabbos, but Zachor, remember the Shabbos all week long also. Remember that spirituality. Bring that spirituality of Shabbos into the week. That's what Shabbos is about. Shabbos is not a standalone day. It's also the 6 days of the week with Shabbos. Yes, please.
During the week, you're very busy with your thoughts and
Yes.
everything you have to do is scheduled.
Yes.
You're one mind, one heart. So when you're going to shul or walking in the street, you know that everybody around you
Yes.
is Shabbat Shalom because you know none of them are thinking about this, that, and the other.
Okay.
We're all on one derek. During the week, we're on 1,000 different drachim. We're here, there, and everywhere.
Okay. So the question is, can we do that even when we're all on different drachim and they're busy with our own lives? Is there a way of opening ourselves up, opening our hearts and our souls to one another a little bit more that reflects the Shabbos? And Rav Kook says, yes, we need to do. That's the tshuva that we need to do at the end of Shabbos. That feeling, that uplift of Shabbos is something that we need to carry with us beyond Shabbos. Yes, Roseanne.
Well, we in this country are blessed because Friday afternoon the buses stop and the stores close, and on Shabbos you're walking every place and you say hello to everybody. Whereas in America, you can be getting in into your car.
Yes.
So Baruch Hashem, we live
Okay,
in-
good. Yeah, I think it is advantage. Yes, please. Ima anochi b'tzara. Ah, right. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
The anticipation of Shabbat davening every day.
Yes. Yom Yom Rishon B'Shabbos. Very beautiful. That's correct. Yes. Yes.
Also, personally would add that it's also important to carry that feeling, goodness, etc., and good opinion about yourself. In other words, that as you reach Shabbat, you don't just go out and have miserable feelings.
Well, I think that's true also. No, I think that's another aspect that we can see. The way that we've been uplifted on Shabbat personally is something that we need. There's a lot that that's another discussion. That's part of this discussion is what is it when we speak about that we have Shabbos and then we have the rest of the week and this idea to bring Shabbos into the week. Well, what is it that we're bringing into the week? So one of the ideas that Rav Kook is highlighting, and I'm sharing with you, is this idea of our relationship with others and the openness and the love that we feel for others, that we feel on Shabbos. Rav Kook says, how do we bring some of that loving nature of Shabbos that somehow happens now? It really does happen naturally on Shabbos. There's an openness, there's like a warmth, there's a closeness that we feel on Shabbos with others that we don't feel in the same way during the rest of the week. I think that's true. But how do we do that? In other words, how do we bring more of that into the Shabbos? I want to share three stories just to conclude our discussion about Shabbos. The first story is the story of Rav Kook, 1914. We're done with our sources. There was actually one more source that didn't make it on your copy, but it's fine. 1914, he makes what's called the Masat Tshuva. He goes together with a group of rabbis and he wants to visit the new settlements up north, which is quite amazing that Rav Kook chooses to do that. Most rabbis were sitting in their base medrash. He said, you know what? Let's go to them. Let's meet them where they are. And I want to share with them how much I care about them. These were the secular kibbutzim, many of them anti-religious, and he would spend Shabbat with them. So on this trip, he had a number of very eminent rabbis. Rabbi Charlap, we mentioned that name. His home is just a few blocks from here. He joined him on that mission, on that trip. And Rabbi Chaim Sonnenfeld was with him as well. Rabbi Chaim Sonnenfeld he really represented sort of a different approach, a different path than Rav Kook. He was not as open to this idea of Rav Kook's loving and embracing nature, especially for those that were rejecting Judaism. He felt that we have to, make it very clear that they have rejected certain things, and we have to make that havdalah, those demarcations. So they were at a kibbutz together on Shabbos, and Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rav Kook. Rav Kook had the following minhag. On Friday night, he would put a little bit of, this is really based on water, right? He would put water, I don't know if we mentioned this story in the past, he would put water into his Kiddush cup. So there's a minhag and there's a Kabbalistic minhag to do that. Based on the Kabbalah, that the wine, even though we think of wine as joyous, but it's red and it represents din, it represents judgment or strict judgment. So you put a little water in, the water represents that it's white, that it represents loving kindness, chesed. So on Shabbos, as you're entering Shabbos, so some of that strictness that we have during the week and the havdalah, the demarcation that we have, and the isolation that we have, that we bring that whiteness into the redness, that's the chesed into the din, using Kabbalistic terminology. And that's what he would do every Friday night, because what Shabbos is a time to be a little less, strict about the way that we judge one another. So that's the drop of water that's placed into the cup. So on that Motzei Shabbos, and he never did this before, that Motzei Shabbos, Rav Kook said, I'm going to pour a little bit of water into the cup of Havdalah as well. Now, Havdalah is a time of separation, right? Let's be very clear, right, that we are separate from one another, the religious camp, the non-religious camp. But Rav Kook said, no, we have to bring Shabbos into the week. Even though I've never done this before, I'm going to pour some water into the wine, because we have to bring that lovingness of Shabbos and that cooperation, that sense of cooperation and kindness, we need to bring that into the week as well. And that's what he did on this as he was standing together with all these secular Jews, which was a statement, a very important statement, that how do we bring some of that Shabbos, that loving nature, character of Shabbos into the week as well. And then Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld, who usually did not see eye to eye with Rav Kook, he also, in his cup of Havdalah, he took some water and he poured it in as well to say, okay, I'm with you on this one. Let's find a way that we can bring a greater unity in OUisrael. So we see Rav Kook, this idea of after Shabbos and trying to bring that loving, that warmth of Shabbos into the week as well. So that's one. Story number two. I'll take your comment just at the end. Story number two. I just want to get to these two more stories. There was a great student of Rav Kook. His name was Rav David Cohen, the Nazir. He was known as the Nazir of Yerushalayim. He followed the laws of Nizirut, that he didn't drink, talking about wine, didn't drink wine. He let his hair grow. You can look at pictures. You can see pictures. Look up the Nazir of Jerusalem. Passed away, I think, 1969. And he followed the laws of Nizirut, which was really something out of the ordinary, because we don't have people being a Nazir, and he wanted to live a very, very holy life. He was a very holy person, considered to be one of the greatest students of Rav Kook. He compiled the Orot HaKodesh, his classic work. So Rav Kook would give a shiur. This goes back to the early 20s, 30s. He gave a shiur every morning in the Beit HaRav, in his Beis Medrash. He taught Mishnayos. He taught Mishnah. And there was a group, mostly the Balabatim, people in the neighborhood would come and they would study with him Mishnayos every day. The Nazir also was in that shiur, was in that class. He came every morning. For some reason, the Nazir stopped coming to the shiur. He stopped coming to the class in Mishnah. So Rav Kook wasn't sure exactly what was happening, and he knew that he was a very loyal student, why he was not coming to the shiur. He didn't really want to ask the Nazir himself, didn't want to put him on the spot. He asked some of the acquaintances, and this was the answer that he received. He said the Nazir stopped coming because that shiur that Rav Kook gave, he gave in Yiddish. He didn't give in Hebrew, because the people of the neighborhood at that time, going back to the 20s, they spoke Yiddish. They weren't really comfortable like us for speaking in English. They're in Israel and Yerushalayim, but they wanted to hear a shiur in the language that they were comfortable hearing. So he gave the shiur in Yiddish. The Nazir felt that he just could not hear Torah being taught in another language other than Hebrew. It was too difficult for him to hear Torah learning in Yiddish. He wanted only to study in Hebrew, that he should only hear and he should only speak Hebrew when he's learning Torah. When Rav Kook heard about this, he said the following. Rav Kook said that he's following, first of all, something that's found in the Midrash. It's a statement in the Sifri, which says, you don't have this in front of you, I'm just reading it to you, Kol hadar be'eretz Yisrael, any person who lives in the land of Israel, u'midaber b'lashon HaKodesh, and speaks Hebrew, the Korei Kriyat Shema, and reads the Shema every day, Harei hu ben olam haba. That person has a very special place in the world to come. So that's good for all of us here. So if you live in the land of Israel, if you speak a little bit of Hebrew, you don't have to speak it all the time, and you speak Kitzat, you speak a little Hebrew, and you say the Shema, you have a very special place in the world to come. So Rav Kook said that's what the Nazir was makbid. He was very careful to follow this teaching. And he said he's a ben olam haba. Even in this world, he's a person that's kind of living. He has one foot in the next world as well. He's such a holy person. So he's very makbid that he only speaks Hebrew. So I respect him for that. And then Rav Kook said one more thing. He said, according to some Kabbalistic traditions, and this is based on the Arizal, that on Shabbos, even if you speak Hebrew during the week, if you speak another language during the week, that you speak only Hebrew on Shabbat. And there are those that follow that custom. I know of one rabbi, one of the Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Eisenstein, that he's makbid just on Shabbat, that even though he speaks with his kids and his family and speaks English, but on Shabbat, he's makbid only Hebrew. And according to some Kabbalists, I think the Gra speaks about it as well, that on Shabbos, that you only speak Hebrew. So Rav Kook said the following. Rav Kook said that for the Nazir, living in Eretz Yisrael for him, he feels that every day is Shabbos. Every day is Shabbos. Outside of the land of Israel, you have just Shabbos on the seventh day. But in Israel, he feels there's as we were talking about, that he feels this fragrance of Shabbos, that he really senses it. He lives it, that every day has Shabbos. And the Nazir is makbid on Shabbos, because he speaks Hebrew, not to speak at all on Shabbos, other than learning Torah and davening and divrei Torah. But that's it. He didn't speak on Shabbos. He didn't converse on Shabbos. Shabbos was just a day for divrei Torah, for tefillah, and that was it. Yes.
Where did you say it was written, that pasuk is in Sifri?
Yeah, so that's the Sifri Ha'azinu Shin Lamed Gimel, if you want to look that up. Sifri Ha'azinu Shin Lamed Gimel. And one last story, let me just get in by the final story, and then we'll, Shin Lamed Gimel, if you want, Sifri Ha'azinu Shin Lamed Gimel. And a final story, and this is, Rav Kook had a group of very close students. We mentioned the Nazir, we have Rabbi Charlap as well. Rav Aryeh Levin, do you know that name? Rav Aryeh Levin, the tzaddik Yerushalayim. He was one of the tzaddik Yerushalayim. He was a very, very close student of Rav Kook. He lived right by Machane Yehuda. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. They used to call that Mishkanot Yisrael, that neighborhood. I don't know if they still call it that today. I think they call it Nachlaot today, whatever it is. So he lived in that area. He, again, this goes back to the 50s, the 60s, not that long ago. So he was really hoping that everybody in the neighborhood and the stores, the shops, the makolets, that they would all close for Shabbos. He wanted that there should be a Shabbos atmosphere, that stores shouldn't be open. Again, that's still, an issue in Yerushalayim and in Israel. But at least in that neighborhood, he was really hoping. And he spoke to the storekeepers, and everybody closed their store except for one storekeeper who did not. He wanted to have his store open on Shabbos, Friday night, and Shabbos day, and makolet. Yeah, who shopped there? Yeah, I guess there were secular people. So interesting. So the story, one Friday night, and he asked him a number of times, and he wasn't really interested. One Friday night, Rav Aryeh Levin is making his way, gets dressed, of course, for Shabbos, making his way to shul, and he passes the shul, and he makes his way to this shop, to this store. And he comes into the store, he says, "Good Shabbos." He says, "Do you mind if I just sit here for a few moments, just rest here?" So the man was very nice, and he got him a stool, and Rav Aryeh Levin, he sat there, and here he is sitting there. It's 20 minutes, it's a half hour, it's an hour, and this is like as Shabbos is starting, like this is davening is going on in the shul, and Rav Aryeh Levin is still sitting in the store. Aryeh Levin sees that people are coming into the store, that people are buying stuff, buying packs of cigarettes, whatever it is that they're buying, and it's Shabbos, and he sees the number of people that are going in and out of the store. So he wishes him good Shabbos. It's about an hour later, and that ends that. Now, this fellow, the owner of the store, is kind of very curious about what just happened here. So the next day, or after Shabbos, Sunday morning, he goes to Rav Aryeh Levin, and he goes to his house, knocks on the door, and he says, if you don't mind, can you tell me what that was all about? That you can't, Shabbos, you're sitting in my store, the first hour of Shabbos. So he said the following. He said, "I was sitting there, and I wanted to see myself, like what it meant for you to close the store on Shabbos." And Rav Aryeh Levin said, "I see how difficult it would be for you to close the store. I see the business that you do Friday night, and I'm not going to ask you to close the store. I see that it's really, that you really need to keep the store open. I respect you, and they shook hands, and that was the end. The next Friday night, the store was closed. And the man said that I saw the respect that Rav Aryeh Levin had for me, and that he was sensitive to my needs. And when I saw that, I closed the store on Shabbat. So that's a Talmud of Rav Kook and the path of Rav Kook. So we should all be zoche to experience Shabbos as a day that's uplifting. We should share. Yeah, one more story. We'll end with it. Yeah, please.